"6:36 in Trinidad and Tobago." Well, many may argue that with all of the daily negative headlines, the social media posts, the comments, Trinidad and Tobago is a traumatized society. The nightly news oftentimes leaves us feeling depressed, a burden many passionate citizens carry. What are some tips for coping with these situations? What about those trying to cope with loss during the holiday season? We are joined by Timothy Charan, who's an executive member of the Association of Psychologists, and indeed, at least for this term, which comes to an end, and he will no longer be a member of the executive, but he will remain a psychologist, which is why we've invited him this morning to get a perspective. Mr. Charan, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Are we a traumatized society?
Simply put, I would say yes.
What is the evidence of a traumatized society?
Well, first, I will start off by defining what is trauma.
Sure, yeah.
Right? So, it's a deeply disturbing or depressing event that somebody has witnessed or observed. So, in our society, once we pick up the newspaper, we see trauma, we see these disturbing events, and it strikes us. We are living in fear. So, it's not easy for us to just turn the blind eye to it. It does affect us on a personal level. So each of us would experience trauma in different ways. So a typical example would be, it's not affecting me. I'll just push it at the back of my mind, move as normal, and it's not going to affect me until it reaches close to home. And then they realize that, we are living in a society where we have to wake up and see that, this is a problem that we have to address in some form or fashion.
Are we addressing the problem from your perspective?
I feel as though the government could do more. We have one guidance counselor per school. We have one psychologist per wellness center. It is not nearly enough. We need to have more public access to the services that the government is offering to the public.
Is it being, I have to be careful how I say it. Is it being glorified or glamorized in any way in the media? Is it because because people often put this point forward that you all have it on the front page every striking morning, every day, every night, somebody get killed, somebody get murdered, some bullying thing, some viral video and so on. One, you are given license to these people to do it again because they get attention from it. And two, you are creating an environment in the mind of the viewer and the listener and the reader that this is a society that is falling apart. Do the media have a role to play in this entire situation?
Well, I believe the perpetrators of the crime, they're not doing it for the attention as such, right? They're doing it because they're struggling internally. That's what I believe. I don't have the statistics to show that, but that's what I feel. The people, to bring awareness to the public, I think is important. So I feel as though that, the media plays a big role to let us know that, these are the crime areas, we should be careful, we should watch our pockets and stuff like that, just for our safety and well-being.
But tell us about the coping mechanisms, because, I mean, when someone comes to you for counseling or obviously, you must respect patient-client confidentiality and all that sort of thing, but just generally, are more people coming to individuals like yourself for advice and some guidance on how to cope with what they see as the stresses of everyday life?
And I think that's a problem in our society where people see stress as a norm. You face the morning traffic to work, it's normal to sit in traffic for 2 hours. If you complain about it, then something is wrong with you, that is normal. But we have to realize that it is not normal for our society to be dealing with this stress on a constant basis. So I would say we have to encourage our society to realize that we need that help, we need that support, that emotional support, and to reach out and access the support that we are providing.
As I was mentioning at the start of the show this morning, I was speaking to someone at Movie Town yesterday who was a victim of crime, was held up at gunpoint. And she said since that happened 5 weeks ago, she could barely sleep because everywhere she goes, she's reliving that experience. How do you, I mean, and we are in a time, and one of the reasons why we've asked you to come, and we usually do it around this time of the year, because there's the contrast of the happiness, the Christmas lights and the parang and everything else, And a lot of people, despite all of that and despite their appearances, very, very depressed, very fearful of different circumstances. Does the outward celebration magnify the inward anguish in some way?
Well, what you described is typical symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, you live in the traumatic events. You know, and that's something that we, in our profession, we have to try to help the individual cope with. Because this event is not going to be forgotten next 10 years. You know, we have to live with that event for the rest of our lives. If something resembles that event, that traumatic event will replay in their mind. So it's a process where we get the individual to accept that, you know, this has really happened to me. I really experienced this fear, this doubt, and these feelings, and really be able to manage those feelings in moving forward. So it's a really difficult process, but it's really important for us to realize that we need that support, to access that support when it happens.
And what is the attitude generally towards that sort of support? Because there was this, I mean, for many, many years, I don't know if it still prevails or if you hear that sort of discussion, that if you were to go for counseling, if you were to go to talk to a psychologist or something, well, you something wrong with you, boy, like you're going mad or something.
Yeah.
Does that still prevail?
It still prevails. So, like for where I work, we do provide employee assistance programs. So we go into the companies and we always touch on those myths. And 9 out of 10 times, the managers, the employees, they do say, yeah, I'm not going to EAP, that means I'm mad. And, you know, we have to try our best to say, no, you know, if we are experiencing overwhelming stress in whatever form or fashion, we need to seek the help.
Do people even know? Do we understand that they do need help? The reason I ask, because people like to say, I'm a big man, I have children and thing, I'm successful and thing, I don't need no help. Do people, or in other situations, do people even recognize that they are showing the symptoms of stress, of anxiety, of many other psychological or psychiatric situations? Do people even acknowledge that they may need to speak to somebody, whether professional or some confidant or something? Do they even recognize that?
They would be able to recognize the symptoms. So a typical symptom would be like insomnia, low energy, where, you know, they have difficulty sleeping because that stress is on their mind. So these symptoms are prevalent, but the problem goes back to what is the norm. So for us, you know, you have stress, you confide in a friend or a coworker or whoever it may be, and, you know, they'll say, well, that normal is Trinidad. You know, the workplace got robbed or whatever, you know, that's expected. And we have to break out of that cycle of the norm, this is the norm, to realize that, you know, we are in a state of crisis.
You describe it as a state of crisis. What causes you to use that phrase, that we are in a state of crisis?
Well, simple statistics. 2015, we ranked number 40 for the top suicide rates. If we open the front page of the news every day, it's a murder. So that, in my opinion, you know, the country is in a state of a crisis, and some action needs to take place to help the society on the whole.
But what action? I mean, beyond the politics. I mean, we could spend a whole time talking about the politics and the politics and the politics. But beyond the politics, what do we need to do? What can we do as ordinary citizens to make this a happier place, to make this a less stressful place?
Yeah, and as I said earlier, you know, there's the system and then there's the people. So I would say we need to change both. The systems there is a system. You know, us as the people, we have to be able to make use of the system to accept that we do need help, we do need support, and it's okay to receive that support.
As we talk about the receiving support, and no doubt a lot of discussions over the last 24 hours has been triggered by the tragic killing of Samantha Isaacs, and the man with whom she was in a relationship killed himself as well as afterwards, and all of that happened on Saturday. Do you have any perspective to offer to this situation, which is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago, where men find it extremely difficult to separate themselves from a relationship and seem to think that for whatever reason that they have some rights or entitlement over the woman? What perspective do you offer to that?
So just to look at trauma on the whole, one of the most traumatic life-changing events would be the loss of a spouse. So to just to go on that, somebody who led that action to take place, it is extremely traumatic for them, and they just reacted. What I would do is to reach out to the public. For the abusee, they feel as though that it may be the norm, and this is something that's really common for a lot of people, where they put their partner's needs, their children's needs, the demands of work before their own well-being. And it's just for them to internalize and say, am I unhappy in this relationship? And really look a little more at self to realize that, this relationship is not healthy for me.
But is that easier said than done? Because we were having that discussion just before we actually came on air, right here among ourselves, that for a woman who finds herself in an abusive relationship, and probably thinking, well, give him a chance, he might reform, I could change him, or there's children in the relationship, I need to stay for the children, what's going to happen to them if I leave, what is going to be our source of support? Are those parts of the considerations that cause this situation like this to develop?
So, I mean, those would be relevant factors to the situation, yes, but we always try to encourage people to look at self,
Isn't that easier said than done, Mr. Chairman? Because I mean, you get lashed or you get beat, and you say, well, I need to walk away from this. But then you say, well, I mean, I could change him. I'm sure he loved me or whatever. I could change him. Or we have children. I can't just, because he might get violent if I take the children away from him. And there are all of these emotional strings attached that make it very, very difficult to just walk away.
Yeah, and that is where we would encourage people to reach out to us, to reach out to the various, like 800 SAVE and these other people who focus on helping people who are in abusive relationships. So we would encourage those people it'll be difficult for them to come out on their own, to realize on their own. But, we try to offer, like, I know 800 SAVE, they advertise on the TV to say that, if you are in an abusive relationship, reach out to us. And, we hope that could reach to enough people of the public to actually make use of the service.
And as far as the Association of Psychologists of Trinidad and Tobago, is there, like, for example, a contact now, apart from the 800 SAVE, if people, I know there are different lifelines and suicide hotlines and so on. If someone wants to maybe contact you after the show, or maybe there's a website or a Facebook page where people can get more information on how they can access professional service of this kind, how would they do so?
Yeah, so we do have a Facebook page, we do have a website, so it's just to go on the website, get our contact number, call us, and we'll try our best to support.
And as far as understanding all of this, some people might say, look, this is all a symptom of the breakdown of family structures, that we wouldn't need people like you coming to talk about this if people were able to talk to your mother, talk to your father, have a strong family system and structure that would allow you to be able to speak to someone in a setting of confidentiality, in a family setting and so on. Is that in any way contributory to the crisis, as you've described, the breakdown of the family system?
I would say yes. Everybody needs that social support. One of the best ways of ensuring our well-being is connecting with others. We do experience stress. How do we deal with that stress? How do we manage with that stress? We connect with others. We share that experience with others. When those systems are not in place, where you don't have the supportive family or a close friend we can confide in, we take that on. We have to deal with that internally. And it's really hard, and it reaches to the point where it builds up till we can't cope, and we suffer the physical symptoms of stress. And
finally, Mr. Chan, because time is going by so quickly, we appreciate you joining us this morning just to offer a perspective, because this is an issue, as with so many issues of real importance. It takes a long time to develop these ideas. But just very quickly on the point where this holiday period, for many people, it's a very painful time. It brings back memories of the loss of a loved one over this time, or maybe it's the first time they're going into the Christmas period without a loved one. Some people are very, very lonely at this time, or they see other people celebrating, which appears to magnify their own loneliness and grief. How should people cope with that?
They cope by connecting with others, but if they need that additional support, to reach out for the help, to contact the Association of Psychologists or any psychological service available in this country, and receive that support, get that assistance to deal with that stress, that trauma that people are experiencing.
Mr. Charan, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Timothy Charan, an executive member of the Association of Psychologists, just scratching the surface essentially on a really serious issue in Trinidad and Tobago, and not just about this time of the year, not just about the tragedy over the weekend, but the broader issues associated with a society that just seems to be bottling up a lot of issues inside, and really should be trying to resolve them in a more productive way. But hopefully we'll be able to have a further discussion at another time on these other issues. We'll take a break and continue here on Morning Edition.